So here's something I noticed about myself recently. Um, if a piece of media is doing something like really good, like firing on every cylinder good, I can't sit back down. I'll get up, grab some food, go to the restroom, and on the way back, I just stop. I'm leaning on my chair, I'm standing in the middle of the room because whatever on my screen is just too good to interrupt by getting comfortable again. It's this very weird involuntary posture thing. My body's way of telling me, like, this is S tier material. Do not disrespect it. And I'm willing to bet that some of you do this too. And on top of that realization, the thing that made me have this moment of clarity was a middle chapter in a trilogy. And that itself, I thought was also interesting because it's a middle chapter, and middle chapters are infamously supposed to be usually the weakest part of the trilogy. But if you read this title, you know that that's probably not the argument that I'm going to be making today. So let's just go ahead and start talking about why Across the Spider-Verse might be the greatest part two that has ever been put to screen. So there is a quote that is often attributed to George Lucas, the guy who basically invented the modern trilogy template. In the first act, you introduce everybody. Second act, you put them in the worst possible position they could ever get into, and they're in a black hole never able to get out. Third act, they get out. The middle film has a bit of a structural curse. No thrill of introduction, no payoff of resolution. It carries narrative weight without narrative closure. But the weird contradiction about part twos is that they're the highest variance position in a trilogy. They produce the most forgettable entries and the most iconic moments in like all of cinema. Almost nothing in between. Like off the top of my head, some examples of the graveyard, the worst of the worst. We have like Men in Black 2, The Exorcist 2, High School Musical 2, and another one, The Matrix Reloaded. Like Den of Geek put Reloaded pretty bluntly. It's shocking how little of Reloaded actually matters. For a lot of franchises, part 2 is where they go to coast. Same formula, bigger budget, nothing underneath. But on the other hand, we also get moments like Darth Vader's true heritage, the Joker interrogation scene, Michael Corleone closing the door on Kay. Simple phrase, I know. And like I was saying a second ago, some of the most iconic moments in film history, not just their respective franchises, but like all of film, live in part twos. So, like, what separates the graveyard from the mountaintop? The Dark Knight doesn't repeat Batman's origin, it interrogates it, no pun intended. What does it cost to be a symbol? Is it a symbol enough? Can you understand the symbol's gravelly voice? Godfather Part 2 doesn't just continue Michael Corleone's arc, it runs his descent in parallel with his father's rise. It becomes both the son of the Godfather and its father. And Empire takes every certainty the first film has established and it tests it. Luke's mentor ends up being wrong, his training ends up not being enough, and his father isn't who he thought he was, even in the slightest. The forgettable Part 2 escalates plot. The legendary ones deepen the themes that they have started. They expand the question instead of just continuing the answer. But here's also something interesting that a lot of people forget or they just never knew because we live in a post-Empire world. When Empire Strikes Back came out in 1980, it was actually initially hated by a lot of fans. Not critics. Critics were, mixed to positive on it, but fans. The people who quote-unquote love Star Wars the most were the angriest. But never forget, there's no one who hates Star Wars more than a Star Wars fan. Famously, there was Starlog magazine that printed letters, open letters for months. One fan wrote, the movie should not have ended until Han was either killed or rescued. They left a little too much. Also, brief aside, I hope Sean is doing okay after The Force Awakens. A staff writer ran a piece literally called Empire Strikes Out. Fans insisted the film was incomplete, it broke the rules of what a Star Wars movie was supposed to do. There was only one movie beforehand, so like what the hell are wrong with what are these people complaining about? The film that became the template for great sequels was initially rejected by its own fandom for violating arbitrary rules that the fandom decided were mandatory. And hold on to that because we'll end up coming back to this later. So let's do all these surface accolades first out of the way. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, nearly matching Into the Spider-Verse's 90%, a 3.4 times opening weekend over the first film. It was one of the biggest sequel leaps in film history, and critics aren't comparing it to the first film. A lot of critics were comparing it actually to The Empire Strikes Back. Brian Tallarico at RogerEbert.com said it flat out. It reminded me of other great part 2s like The Dark Knight and Empire Strikes Back. So with that symptom, I was really curious about what is the cause? What are the things that make this just as good, and in some ways, if not better, than some of the greatest sequels of all time? So Into the Spider-Verse asks one question: can Miles Morales be Spider-Man? The whole film is a proof. By the leap of faith, he's answered it. The theme is crystallized clean. Anyone can wear the mask. Across ends up opening with Gwen. There are watercolors everywhere, a drum kit that is washed in a visual style that you've never seen in a superhero movie, much less any animated movie that I can think of. And even if you heard that the sequel was going to expand Gwen's role, you probably didn't expect it to open basically inside her head. And at first you think it's just Spider-Verse flexing another art swing, another universe style, and then it just keeps going and going. And somewhere in that opening, you realize the watercolors aren't a flourish. This is what Gwen's world looks like. This is her visual language. The film is committing this to her aesthetic, in her universe, in her perspective. Because this isn't a prologue. This is the co-lead announcement. Miles shows up 16 months later, more confident and more mastered. By then, the stakes have already shifted. He's not proving he can be Spider-Man anymore. He's proving what kind of Spider-Man he's going to be when the universe tells him no. The sequel doesn't ask the first film's question louder. It takes a deeper look at the question that only makes sense because the first one was already answered. Can I do this becomes who am I going to be while doing it? You can run that transform anywhere. Can I hold down a job to what kind of worker? Can I be a parent to what kind of parent? The first question is about capacity, and the second is about your identity in that role. You don't get to skip to the second one until you've already answered the first. Part 2 has a very traditional shape. Vader reveals that he's Luke's father and cuts off his hand. Frodo disappears into Mordor alone with the Fellowship being fractured. Batman takes the fall for Harvey Dent and rides off hunted. The Part 2 cliffhanger is the genre's most reliable move. Everything's broken, everything is bleak until Part 3 comes to fix it. Where most middle films fail is by mistaking this for suspending everyone in crisis at once. Every arc is deferred. Ambiguity for like 2+ years and the promise that it'll all make sense eventually. No one actually feels satisfied by that. You just end up with The Matrix Reloaded at that. Across the Spider-Verse does this traditional ending with Miles. It's in the wrong universe. Spider Society is hunting him. His dad has been marked for death. The genre's shape is still intact. The hero is at his lowest. It is what people are expecting. But then the film splits the load. Gwen Stacy gets her complete emotional arc running parallel to Miles' descent. She starts isolated from her father, joins the Spider Society, learns that belonging on someone else's term isn't really belonging, and reconciles with her dad in those closing beats. She's got her closed loop. The story is done. And look at where her arc resolves. Not with the Spider Society, not chasing Miles. She goes home, outside the multiverse chaos, to stand with her dad, existing outside of everything else to be with him, which is what she wanted all along. The film's most emotionally complete moment is also its most grounded one. And because her story is finally resolved, she is able to be the one who leads. She isn't a damsel waiting to be rescued. By the final beats, she's the one building the rescue team. She's very much like Leia in her final form, the princess who becomes the general. Germain Lucier at Gizmodo very much nailed it. This is not simply a Miles Morales movie, it's a Gwen Stacy movie. You don't need total closure to feel finished. One story resolving cleanly carries the audience emotional satisfaction while other threads can stay open. Closure isn't always a single event in real life. It's a pattern you can complete one instance of at a time. Alright, and here's like the part where the art nerd in me just can't shut up about it, but to get what Across pulled off, you have to understand what it was up against at the time. So The first Spider-Verse really invented this modern multimedia animation look. Halftones, chromatic aberration, mixed frame rates, and comic panels, the whole style. Completely revolutionary for 2018, and it worked so well that every animation studio copied it in their own way. Mitchell's vs. the Machines, Puss in Boots 2, Bad Guys, Mutant Mayhem, Arcane. 5 years later, the style had become saturated. You couldn't throw a rock on a streaming platform without hitting Spider-Verse's fingerprints. And yes, I also know some of those were Sony studios, but you're telling me that Sony Animation Pictures can't come up with other styles. But I mean, regardless, I love this technique. It's like one of my personal favorites. I think multimedia animation is just awesome. But by 2023, it wasn't new anymore. So the sequel had to do something harder than invent a new style. It had to go beyond the thing that it itself had already invented. And they pulled it off by pulling the lens back. Instead of referencing just comics and animation, they started referencing visual art as a whole. The first film was very much a love letter to comics, and the second is a love letter to visual art in all its forms and all its glory. Like, these are the pictures that moving pictures are derived from. The phrase that every frame is a painting across the Spider-Verse is the literal manifestation of that. Not painterly, not inspired by paintings, but every frame being its own painting pulled from a specific tradition. Gwen's universe is impressionist watercolor, wet on wet, emotional color theory made literal. Hobie's world is Dadaist photo montage and punk xerography, the whole zine scene, a century of collage tradition anarchy compressed into a single character. The Vulture in Earth 666 is a Renaissance pen and ink sketch, a Da Vinci parchment study animated to life. These aren't animation choices, these are art history choices. Because Across knows something that the copycats didn't. Animation didn't just come from comics, it came from art. This animation isn't decoration, it's argument in its own way, and every technical choice says something. Like, starting with Miles, animation nerds already know about the whole animating on twos. 12 drawings per second instead of the traditional 24, giving that distinct stuttered comic feel. And Into the Spider-Verse, Miles was drawn on twos when he was an experience, when he did the leap of faith. The moment that he became Spider-Man, his animation smoothed into ones. The frame rate reflected his internal state. He became one-to-one. And then there's Gwen. Her whole universe is animated in watercolor. It's an effect that required tools the team had to invent from scratch to teach computers how to fake a human hand dragging wet paint across paper. And the colors of her world shift based on her emotional state. The directors described it as mood ring coloring. When Gwen's angry at her father, wine-colored reds bleed across the frame. When she connects, there are pinks and oranges. And when she finally reconciles with him, and like, this is the detail that breaks me, her dark pastel shadows melt into like these golden rays. The environment is the feeling. And then there's Spider-Punk. Hobie Brown. Like, this one is going to be a little bit more technical, so bear with me. Different parts of his body animate at different frame rates simultaneously. So his body will animate on 3s, his guitar be on 4s, and his outline will be on 2s, and his vest and torso will also be on 3s, but offset by a few frames. So no parts of his being are ever in sync with anything else. The animators demonstrated his philosophy through the animation technique itself. You're not just hearing Hobie say he's an anarchist, you're watching an anarchist literally refuse to obey the rules of how a single character moves through space. Meanwhile, Miguel, the antagonist, the enforcer of canon events, move on smooth, rigid, consistent 24 FPS. The most normal animation in the film is attached to the character arguing the most authoritarian and rigid philosophy. In the great middle films of cinematic history, the method also reflects the thesis. The how demonstrates the what. The more chaotic editing of The Dark Knight mirrors the chaos that the Joker is bringing to Gotham. The Godfather 2, using a dual timeline storytelling technique, mirrors generational inheritance. To me, Across is just the cleanest, loudest example ever put to screen. Alright, let's start bringing it home and let's talk about Miguel real quick. The central conflict of Across the Spider-Verse turns on one idea: Canon events. Every spider person across every dimension has to live through certain specific tragedies. Lose your Uncle Ben, lose a police captain. Certain griefs are load-bearing, if you will. If any spider person avoids their canon event, reality itself will collapse. Miguel's entire worldview, suffering isn't bad luck, suffering is structural requirement. And Miles, watching his own father, a police captain, walk directly into his canon event, looks at Miguel and says, "Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing." He rejects the premise, not the prediction, but the premise. The whole idea that certain suffering is mandatory. This is the part of the movie I think a lot of people feel but can't really articulate. Canon events aren't fictional, at least in my opinion, not really. You have canon events. I have canon events. They're the moments anyone of a certain age can reference without context. For boomers, this is going to be something like the JFK assassination. Ask anyone born before 1955 where they were when Kennedy got shot, and they'll tell you a specific room, specific radio. It's a load-bearing cultural memory. For millennials like me, it's probably going to be 9/11. It's where were you in third period, or where were you in elementary class? Also Harambe. Yes, seriously, Harambe. The absurd shared moment of internet grief, a very canon event for the internet. It marked how a generation learned to process loss online, and many people would say that's where the timeline split. And for Gen Z, correct me if I'm wrong, I would probably say Trump's first term or maybe COVID, the political coming of age event that shaped how a whole generation understood things like institutions, authority, and the media. These canon events are real. They're not comic book nonsense. They describe something true about how generations form shared reference points. So the film isn't arguing canon events don't exist. It's making a sharper, more useful argument. It's arguing that canon events are descriptive, not prescriptive. So while they have described patterns that have happened, they don't dictate what must happen. And the moment you confuse the two, the moment you mistake this is what every Spider-Man has gone through for this is what every Spider-Man is required to go through, you've handed your autonomy to a pattern that was never even a rule in the first place. Okay, this is editor me here, camera off, just like in a Zoom meeting, but something I forgot to add was that this movie, I think, very much feels almost like its own rebuttal to something like The Great Gatsby or an F. Scott Fitzgerald novel. F. Scott Fitzgerald once said that there are no second acts in American lives. So shout out to every English teacher who made us slog through Gatsby at 15, because it turns out that the required reading isn't exactly useless after all. So who knew? But the world, according to Gatsby and F. Scott Fitzgerald, is once you fall, you stay fallen. Your third act is just the consequence of your first. It's one of the most stubborn ideas in American culture, that you get one shot at defining yourself, and after that, you're just confirming the shape. You're washed. Across the Spider-Verse wasn't really written as a rebuttal to Fitzgerald, but the themes end up there anyways. Miguel's worldview is the Fitzgerald argument in Spider-Man form. Your canon events are mandatory. The shape of your story is fixed. There are no second acts. And this isn't really a new argument for Miles. I mean, the first movie built the foundation. Peter Parker, the iconic, the original, dies in the beginning of the movie. He's gone. And the ghost of Stan Lee shows up and tells Miles that anyone can wear the mask. And there's no refunds. So you better grow into that suit. So Miles' entire existence as Spider-Man is proof that the second act exists. He is the second act. Marvel invented him in 2011 in a comic book called Ultimate Fallout by killing the iconic Peter Parker and handling the mantle to a half-black, half-Puerto Rican teenager from Brooklyn.
Oh, we're gonna make Spider-Man black now? We're just gonna make Spider-Man black now? That's what we're gonna do? We're just gonna make Spider-Man black? That's what we're gonna do? We're gonna make Spider-Man black now? We're gonna make Spider-Man black? Well, why don't we just have Michael Cera play Shaft?
The whole Miles Morales franchise, the comics for over a decade, the film since 2018, the video game on PlayStation, Sony, send me a PlayStation 5 Pro please, they're really expensive. But they have been arguing that second acts exist since the day that he was created. So choosing him as a protagonist of a film dismantling the canon event fallacy isn't exactly accidental. He's the most thematically coherent character Marvel could have ever picked. A character whose very existence as Spider-Man is the canon event fallacy refuted. Miguel sees the pattern and he calls it physics. Miguel looks at the same pattern and he calls it a habit. So let's take this at scale. The canon event fallacy isn't just a comic book idea. It's the exact fallacy you see in every hardcore fandom. The Star Wars fan insisting that Jedi must not feel emotions because one character said it once in the prequel. The Last Jedi was good, damn it. So let's go back to those Star Wars letters from the beginning. Those fans hated Empire when it came out because it broke rules of what sequels were supposed to do. They were making the same mistake that Miguel was making in Spider-Verse. They saw a pattern and they called it the law. And now 43 years later, Spider-Verse is doing the exact same thing with the exact same fallacy. Except this time the film is doing it about itself. It's a middle chapter that refuses to be transitional. Like, both as a parent and as a millennial, it's just so much of my life right now is from both ends of your kids are supposed to be hitting these milestones or else you are failing them as a parent, and also you are supposed to be hitting these milestones as an adult, and if you aren't, you're not only failing yourself, but you're also failing your family. And it is so hard to sit there and not just fall into that trap and not to just sit and be miserable all of the time, because so many of these things that we are forced to compare ourselves and our children against are in many ways arbitrary. All right, let's try to do this one more time. So I told you at the top that Across the Spider-Verse made me just stand up in the middle of the room while watching it. And now I can tell you exactly when. The first time was Spider-Punk, when I realized that every part of his body was on a different frame rate, and I was watching the craft of film becoming the philosophy of the character in real time. The second was Gwen reconciling with her father, because I watched an animated movie paint emotional resolution on a screen in a way that I didn't know animation could do. And the last one, the one I stood up for the longest, was the entire fight with the Spider Society leading up to the point of Miles saying that he's just going to do his own thing. Because I've spent so much of my life being told which canon events in my story were mandatory. You have to do college this way, be this kind of worker, be this kind of father, be this kind of creator, this kind of man. Every one of these rules was pattern being sold as requirement. And the movie, in one line, handed me the tool to tell them apart. And that's not just my story, that's just the whole framework, the whole philosophy, the one to keep close. So a little bit less heavy, a little bit more lighthearted. I want to know about media that you realize that you were just standing up in the middle of your living room or your bedroom or whatever because of the fact that you were just like so entrenched in it. Leave me a comment, give me some stuff to watch, some stuff to experience, and then it might end up in a future video. Like, I can at least tell you right now, Andor is on the short list. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for taking the time to talk about Spider-Verse with me. Like I said, one of my favorite movies of all time. And then just one more reminder, I am not a movie review channel. I am a video essay channel that occasionally gives parenting advice. So if that sounds like your jam, be sure to like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTubey things down in the doobly-doo. And I think actually the next video we're gonna talk about Magic the Gathering. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a trading card game arc, and it's gonna be fun. And even if you're not into trading card games, I think that you will at least learn some new stuff that you will find interesting. And that's why I have, well, that and ADHD. That's why I talk about so many different things, is because, I mean, there's too many different things in life to not enjoy it. And so I'm going to go back to finishing this video and then doing some gardening. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. I love you all. I'm going to be putting up the patrons here now because I really need to be better about that. And yeah, oh, patrons, y'all are going to be getting some stuff here soon. I have a lot of stuff I need to update you guys on. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background right now, and I'm very excited, and I will have to update you all. And I am rambling now, so let's finish this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you all. Bye. Be safe. Peace. Bye. Okay. Bye.